Welcome to Velvet Crimes. A coat appears where no man stands. A voice echoes long after its speaker is gone. And in the dim corridors beneath London's theatres, something human, or nearly human, refuses to fade into silence. This is not a story of ghosts, but of guilt. Not of the supernatural, but of sound itself. And of the detective who learned to listen until the truth spoke back. So, hush the world for a while, and step with us into the echo. It began with a sound so ordinary that I almost missed its strangeness. A knock upon the door of Baker Street, 3 raps, then silence, then the same pattern repeated, a rhythm that mimicked hesitation. I looked up from the fire and saw Holmes's eyes already fixed on the door, his violin bow frozen mid-air as if the tune itself had paused to listen. "Come in," said he, not rising. The visitor entered, a man whose coat seemed too large for him in every sense, sleeves swallowing his wrists, collar too high for his neck, shoulders hunched as if under invisible weight. He shut the door softly, and that faint double echo of wood upon wood returned, smaller this time, like an afterthought of the first. "You will forgive the intrusion," he murmured. His voice was coarse, yet tremulous, and I caught the smell of damp wool and something faintly metallic. "You are expected," Holmes replied. "You sent your telegram from the General Post Office at 9:45 this morning, having already mislaid the walking stick you now regret leaving on the omnibus." The man's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. He stared at Holmes as one might at a mirror that had begun to speak. I confess I felt the usual surge of admiration mixed with a twinge of irritation. Holmes never allowed mystery to breathe before he strangled it with logic. Yes, quite right," said our visitor, sinking into the chair I offered. "My name is Henry Castor. Something has occurred at my place of employment that I cannot comprehend." "And where is that?" asked Holmes. "At Hatherley's, the costumier, off Shaftesbury Avenue. I oversee the rental ledgers and deliveries." "Last night." "Holmes, it's difficult to explain." "Try," said Holmes gently. Castor drew a breath. "One of the coats returned from hire this morning was hung upon its peg in the storage room. Nothing remarkable in that, except that I was the only one present when it was hung. And yet, I swear to you, Doctor, there was already a shadow upon the wall as though a man stood behind it. But there was no one. Only the coat, swaying slightly, though no window was open. The fire snapped then, and the echo of that first knock seemed to answer it, faint but insistent within my mind." "A coat hung where no man stood," murmured Holmes, repeating the phrase as though tasting its symmetry. "What manner of coat?" "An overcoat, sir, dark grey, fine wool. Tag marked for Lord Tregarron, an actor, recently deceased." "Recently deceased?" Holmes leaned forward. 2 weeks ago. He collapsed, on stage during a performance at the Duke's Theatre. The coat was among the costumes collected afterwards. It should have been sealed, inventoried, but it arrived only yesterday, unmarked." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And last night it moved. Swayed, rather, as if disturbed by breath or thought." Holmes stood. I noted that subtle transformation that overtook him whenever the impossible brushed his reason. The languor fell away. His gestures grew precise, economical. "Watson, the lantern. Mr. Castor, you will accompany us back to the shop." "Now," Castor stammered. "Now," repeated Holmes. Delay is the assassin of clarity. Within minutes we were descending the stairs, the double echo of the knocks still haunting the back of my hearing. The fog had thickened outside, clinging to the lamps so that each glowed like a memory behind glass. Castor led the way through narrow streets, the click of our steps keeping uneven time. Holmes walked slightly ahead, silent save for the occasional hum, the same 3-beat rhythm as the knock. I could tell he was turning it over in his mind, listening to pattern as others listened to melody. When we reached Hatherley's, the gaslight within was low and yellow. Rows of garments hung like mute witnesses, uniforms, gowns, shrouds of forgotten playhouses. The air smelled of dust and starch and faint perfume. Somewhere deep inside, a chain creaked. "This way," whispered Caister. We entered the storage room. There it was, the coat suspended neatly upon its peg, sleeves empty, fabric still. Yet even as I watched, it seemed to draw a breath. The motion was almost imperceptible, a slow inward tremor, then stillness again. Holmes approached. His hand hovered an inch from the cloth. I could see his profile sharpen in the lamplight, all concentration and caution. "Do you hear it, Watson?" I listened. At first only the tick of a clock, then faintly, a double tap, like fingers upon wood. "The same rhythm," said Holmes. "Not the building settling, not the clock. The question is, who or what imitates human hesitation so precisely?" Before I could answer, the lamp flickered. For a moment, the coat's shadow grew long and distinct across the wall, too distinct, for it showed not only fabric, but the outline of a man's head. Then the flame steadied, and the shape was gone. Caister gave a low cry. Holmes seized the lantern and swept its light across the room. Floorboards, corners, ceiling. Nothing. He turned to me, eyes bright with the first glint of discovery. "There is more life in absence, Watson, than in presence. Observe what refuses to exist, and you approach truth." The double knock came again, nearer this time from behind the closed door. Holmes raised a finger for silence. The sound repeated, measured, patient. 3 raps. Pause. 3 again. He stepped forward, hand upon the latch. The lamp dimmed once more, and in that brief eclipse, I thought I saw the coat lift from its peg as if drawn upward by invisible hands. Holmes flung the door open. Only darkness waited beyond. Holmes's arm was still extended upon the latch when that same knock echoed again, but farther now, as though it had stepped backward down an unseen corridor. Caister's breath rasped beside me, and I confess my own hand went to the revolver I carried more from habit than courage. Holmes did not move. He seemed to listen, not merely with his ears, but with his entire frame, head slightly tilted, as though the air itself might confess its secrets if held in scrutiny long enough. "Step back," he murmured. "There is more to be gained by silence than pursuit." He closed the door softly, eyes fixed on the coat. The fabric hung perfectly still once more, its shadow reduced to a thin outline against the wall. The clock resumed its ticking, indifferent to our unease. "You see, Watson," he said after a moment, "the sound travels not as from distance but from repetition, an echo seeking its origin. An echo cannot choose when to return, Holmes. Ah, but it can when a man helps it along." He stooped, examining the baseboard beneath the pegs. His fingers traced the wood until they paused at a narrow slit. From his pocket, he drew a penknife, worked it into the gap, and prized loose a panel. Within the hollow cavity lay a narrow brass tube, dull with dust. "An old stage contrivance," Holmes murmured, examining it. "Theaters often employ such devices to carry cues from one wing to another. Sound passes through, distorted yet recognizable. Observe." He placed his mouth near the opening and tapped thrice with the handle of his knife. At once, the same pattern answered from somewhere beyond the wall. 3 raps, pause, 3 again. Caister staggered back. So it was a trick, a device, yes. But who used it, and for what purpose? Holmes straightened. A man does not conceal a speaking tube behind a costume wall unless he intends secrecy of message. "You said this coat belonged to Lord Tregarron?" Caister nodded weakly. "Then we must inquire not into his death, but into what survived it." Before I could frame a question, Holmes lifted the coat gently from its peg. The faint metallic scent I had noticed earlier grew stronger, a whisper of iron and something chemical, sharp enough to catch in the throat. He shook the garment slightly. A small envelope slipped from the inner lining and drifted to the floor. Holmes caught it deftly. The paper bore a faint grease stain and the initials LT in bold theatrical hand. He opened it with surgical care. Inside lay a single playing card, the King of Hearts, its face blotched with what appeared to be rust. "Rust or blood," said Holmes softly. He held the card beneath the lamp. The red pigment shimmered darkly. Beneath the printed crown, someone had scrawled a few hurried words. "The final scene awaits." Castor gave a strangled sound. Holmes turned the card over. On the reverse, an address: Duke's Theatre, stage door. Holmes smiled faintly. "The dead still keep their appointments, Watson." The air stirred then, faint but perceptible, as though the room itself exhaled. The coat trembled once more on his arm. "Enough," said Holmes. "We are puppets to another's string play here. Let us meet the unseen hand." We left the storage room, locking it behind us. As we stepped into the narrow passage beyond, that hollow knock returned, a single rap this time, not three. It followed us like a heartbeat down the corridor until the front door closed upon it. Outside, the fog pressed close about the street lamps. Castor muttered that he would remain at the shop no longer. Holmes waved a hand dismissively. "Keep your post till morning, Mr. Castor. You have already left once tonight, though you do not yet know it. I beg your pardon? Your coat is missing." Castor looked down in confusion, then gasped. "My own coat." It was upon the chair by the fire. Holmes nodded. It vanished while we examined the speaking tube. Theft was not the purpose, however. The substitution of one coat for another is a gesture, not a robbery. "Come, Watson." We hailed a cab and made for the Duke's Theatre. The fog thickened to a living thing, coiling through the gaslight. Holmes sat forward, eyes distant, tapping the King of Hearts against his palm in the same three-beat rhythm. "You see, Watson," he said at length, "Lord Tregarron was playing Lear the night he died, a king betrayed upon his own stage. This card, the final scene awaits, suggests the performance continues without him. You think someone uses his death as theatre? Perhaps as confession. The boundary between play and crime is often a fragile curtain." We arrived at the stage door, a narrow passage lit by one lamp. The watchman within, half asleep, admitted us after a brief parley. Holmes's card from Scotland Yard proved persuasive, though I saw the man's eyes widen when he noted the name on it. Holmes moved quickly, past the dressing rooms toward the stage itself. The boards creaked under our feet. Each sound returned twice, as though the building repeated us to itself. That echo again, the same soft duplication that had haunted Hatherley's. He ascended the stage. Scenery loomed in half-light, painted battlements, clouds upon canvas. The ghost of tragedy lingered here. One could almost hear applause still vibrating in the wood. Holmes's gaze fixed on a solitary figure sitting at the far end of the stage beneath a dangling rope. The man wore a dark overcoat. For one absurd instant I thought it the same garment returned to life. Holmes approached, cautious. The man's head was bowed. "Sir," said Holmes. No answer. He touched the shoulder. The figure slumped forward. The coat was empty. Only folded newspaper within, stuffed to shape. Holmes straightened slowly. "A message, Watson. An illusion presented to us, and to any who might come seeking truth. Whoever orchestrates this knows how to use absence as spectacle." From the wings came a soft scrape, the distinct sound of a foot dragging wood. Holmes turned sharply. "Who's there?" Silence. Then the knock again, faint but unmistakable. 3 taps from behind the backdrop. Holmes whispered, "Stay here." He vanished behind the curtains. I listened to his steps recede, then halt. A pause. Then his voice, low but urgent. "Watson, come quickly." I hurried forward, pushing past the painted scenery. Holmes stood beside an open trap door leading beneath the stage. A narrow stair descended into blackness. From below drifted a low hum. The same rhythm again, 3 tones pulsing like a heartbeat made of air. Holmes raised his lantern. The light trembled upon wooden beams, upon coiled rope, and upon a second coat hanging from a nail, swaying gently though no breeze touched it. Holmes descended first, the lantern's light swinging in small, deliberate arcs. The narrow stair groaned beneath our weight, each step echoing in the hollow space as though we walked inside a lung. The sound grew louder with every footfall. 3 creaks. Pause. 3 again. I could no longer tell whether it was coincidence or mimicry. At the bottom, we found ourselves in the underbelly of the theatre, where ropes, pulleys, and counterweights hung like a skeleton's sinews. The air was heavy with dust and varnish. The second coat still swayed from its nail, its hem brushing the wooden beam beside it. Holmes raised the light until it touched the fabric surface. "The same tailoring," he said quietly. "But notice the lining, Watson. No maker's label, no wear upon the cuffs. This coat was never worn for warmth. You think it was made for deceit? For staging, rather. A prop meant to appear lived in, perhaps to substitute one body for another." He reached into the inner pocket and withdrew a folded playbill, its edges frayed. The headline read, "The Tragedy of Lear. Final Performance, March 3rd. Beneath the cast list, a name was scrawled in pencil. Tregarron, dead before curtain. Holmes studied it. Death recorded upon a program before the man had drawn his last breath. You see the irony? Someone anticipated the fall before it occurred. But why preserve this beneath the stage? Because here, Watson, the line between artifice and confession is thinnest. Whoever hides within this theatre understands performance as a weapon. A faint rustle interrupted him. Fabric against wood, soft but distinct. Holmes turned the lantern toward the sound. The coat had ceased swaying. Instead, something beneath it glittered. He knelt and retrieved a small metal disc no larger than a shilling, pierced through the center. "A theatre token," he murmured, examining it. "Numbered 37. Such tokens reserve private boxes. Yet this one bears no engraving of the Duke's theatre. It belongs to the Orpheum across the river." "Then our stage expands," said I. "Precisely. And perhaps our phantom moves between them as freely as sound through a tube." He slipped the token into his pocket. The humming had ceased, replaced by the slow drip of condensation from the rafters. Holmes extinguished the lantern's flame until only a dull ember glowed. "Listen now," he whispered. Out of the blackness came a single exhalation, faint but deliberate, followed by 3 soft knocks. Wood upon wood, close enough that I felt them through my boots. Holmes straightened. "Not echo, Watson. Reply." He struck a match. The flare revealed a low door in the far wall, half hidden behind stacked scenery. He opened it. A narrow passage stretched ahead, curving slightly, its boards damp and gleaming. "This," he said, "leads to the adjoining property. Likely an old service corridor used before the fire regulations tightened. Our invisible performer uses it still." We advanced, our steps whispering over the planks. Somewhere ahead a faint light flickered, not steady flame but reflection, like that of a mirror catching stray luminescence. When we reached the corner, Holmes paused and gestured for silence. Through a gap in the brickwork we could see a small chamber beyond. A man sat there at a wooden table, head bowed over a phonograph. Beside him lay reels of wax cylinders, a heap of garments, and what looked horribly like the missing coat from Castor's shop. Holmes motioned me closer. "Observe," he breathed. The man, gaunt, theatrical even in solitude, adjusted the cylinder upon the machine and turned the handle. The horn crackled, then emitted a hollow rhythm, 3 knocks, a pause, and 3 again. The very pattern that had haunted us. Holmes's face lit with comprehension. "Artificial echo," he murmured. He records his own code upon wax and plays it back through tubes across the adjoining walls. The illusion of haunting is complete, ingenious. For what purpose? To summon attention or to conceal it? The same act serves both master and misdirection. Holmes stepped forward suddenly, pushed the door open, and entered. The man at the table looked up with the blank astonishment of one awakened mid-dream. His eyes, grey and rimmed with kohl, widened as Holmes approached. "Mr. Castor sends his regards," said Holmes. "Or shall I call you by your stage name?" "Edmund Venn, understudy to Lord Tregarron." The man's lips trembled. You've no right." "I have reason, which is more enduring. You see, Venn, a coat that moves without a man is merely theatre, unless the man wishes the world to think him dead." Venn rose sharply, knocking the phonograph to the floor. The cylinder shattered. He stood rigid, breath coming in shudders. "You think me a ghost maker, do you?" he spat. "You think I staged his fall?" Holmes's tone remained level. "You wrote his death before it occurred. That playbill attests it, and now you rehearse it nightly for no audience but guilt." Venn's expression flickered between rage and despair. He pressed his hands against his temples. "He stole my lines, my role, my life." The crowd worshipped him while I waited in shadow. So yes, I rehearsed. I rehearsed his final bow. Then the fall was no accident. He laughed hoarsely. "Accident?" He drank from his prop chalice. "I merely ensured the potion tasted of truth." "Poisoned wine," whispered Holmes. Venn collapsed onto the stool, trembling. I only meant to humble him, to make him faint, nothing more. But he died before the line was spoken. The king fell before the curtain. "And the coat?" Holmes demanded. He stared at it where it lay draped across the table. "I sent it back to Hatherley's, as they requested. But each night I hear him knocking still. I record the rhythm to silence him, yet it returns." Holmes regarded him with a strange gentleness. "Guilt is the most persistent echo, Mr. Venn. It answers whether we call or not." He turned to me. "Watson, the police will find this man still capable of remorse. Ensure he keeps it." Venn buried his face in his arms. From beneath the table came that low hum again, the phonograph spring unwinding itself in dying rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 again. Holmes picked up the broken cylinder, its wax smeared with dust. "The sound you hear," he said, "is not the dead returning. It is memory refusing silence." He looked once more at the coat, then extinguished the lantern. In darkness, the rhythm lingered, softer now, like a heartbeat fading into thought. The hum dwindled into stillness, and in that silence, Holmes exhaled, long and deliberate, as if releasing the case itself. Yet something in his posture told me that the conclusion was only apparent, that, as ever, his mind had already slipped beyond confession toward contradiction. "You see, Watson," he said quietly, "guilt has a voice, but it does not usually require machinery to speak." "Then you think Venn's contrition false?" "Not false. Misdirected. He fears what he made, not what he did. There is a difference." Holmes turned the lantern wick higher. The pale glow revealed the table strewn with fragments of wax and splinters of cylinder. He brushed them aside with his long fingers, eyes narrowing at a small metallic glint half buried in the debris. With a motion quick as thought, he plucked it free. "A key, Watson. Small, flat, and cut for a cabinet, not a door." Venn lifted his head. "That belongs to the theatre safe. I returned it when they dismissed me." Holmes studied him. "Did you? Or did you return another in its likeness?" Venn's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. Holmes pocketed the key. Then his tone softened. almost reflective. When men stage death, they seldom realize that the play continues afterward. Even the dead can send encore messages if someone listens hard enough. He motioned for me to assist, and together we escorted Ven upstairs. The corridors seemed narrower now, the boards louder beneath our steps. That same 3-beat rhythm returned unbidden, each footfall answering another, like conscience in pursuit. Outside, the fog had thickened into a grey wall. Holmes hailed a cab and instructed the driver to make for Bow Street. Ven sat between us, silent save for the occasional tremor that ran through his frame. Holmes tapped, the token from the Orpheum against his knee. "Tell me, Ven, why that theatre?" His eyes flickered. "I kept a room there once. The stage manager owed me wages and paid in kind, but I've not been near it these 6 months. And yet this token lay hidden beneath the coat you hung to haunt another man. You see, Mr. Ven, the past follows even those who think themselves pursued by ghosts." Ven turned away, and for a moment I pitied him, an actor undone by his own performance. But Holmes was not finished. When we reached Bow Street, he delivered Ven to the sergeant with curt instructions and a note for Inspector Gregson. Then, without a word, he hailed another cab and gestured for me to follow. "Back to Baker Street?" I asked. "Not yet. There is an unanswered sound still beating between these walls." The cab turned east along the Strand, its wheels hissing over the damp cobbles. Holmes leaned forward, eyes gleaming through the misted window. "The Orpheum, Watson. The final resonance lies there." When we arrived, the theatre was dark, save for a faint glow from the manager's office above the vestibule. Holmes produced the key he had taken from Ven and fitted it to the side door. It turned smoothly, without protest. Within, the air was cooler, scented faintly with grease paint and mold. Our steps echoed. 3 beats, pause, 3 again, until Holmes stopped before a small iron safe set into the wall of the manager's room. He inserted the key, turned it, and opened the door. Inside lay a single phonograph cylinder wrapped in brown paper and a folded note addressed to the one who listens. Holmes opened the note. "If the echo ceases, wind it again. Truth requires rehearsal." He placed the cylinder upon the desk's phonograph, wound the handle, and lowered the needle. The horn crackled, hissed, then spoke in Lord Tregarron's voice. Holmes and I exchanged a look of stunned recognition. "My final scene," the voice said, faint but unmistakable. "If I fall tonight, let it be known that I fall by art, not by deceit. The king dies as he must, but another wears the crown." Then 3 knocks resounded from the horn, slow and deliberate. The cylinder whirred to its end, leaving only the faint click of the mechanism. Holmes shut it off. The silence afterward seemed alive. "Watson," he murmured. "Tregarron anticipated his own death. This was no murder by surprise. It was a collaboration." "You mean he consented?" "Not consent, precisely. A man of theatre sees fate as a stage cue. He prepared the echo so that even in death he might direct the performance. But why involve Ven? Because Ven lacked the courage to strike first. Tregarron gave him the role of avenger, knowing guilt would complete the punishment. Ingenious cruelty, Watson. Revenge disguised as grace." He lifted the cylinder to the light. "See how carefully it's cut." Tregarron left his confession for discovery only after repetition. Every knock we heard was his line continuing through another's. Guilt. Holmes replaced the item in its case. The faint tapping sound resumed. Not from the phonograph, but from somewhere beneath the floorboards. 3 beats. Pause. 3 again. Holmes crouched, pressed his ear to the boards, and smiled grimly. The tube continues under this office, as it did beneath the Duke's Theatre. The 2 houses are joined not by alley or passage, but by voice. "A hidden network of sound," I said. "Precisely. Theatres share their ghosts, Watson. It is economical. He pried up a loose plank, revealing another brass tube running downward into the dark. From its mouth issued a faint vibration, like breath caught in a hollow throat. Holmes whispered into it, "The play is over." For a moment, nothing came. Then, impossibly, a whisper returned, his own words, delayed and distorted, repeating from the void. "The play is over." He replaced the board and rose. "Let us return home. There remains only one test to confirm what manner of intelligence has kept this echo alive." As we stepped into the street again, a distant church bell struck 2. The fog swallowed its last note, and in the hush that followed, I thought I heard, faint but clear, the same threefold knocking, traveling somewhere through the mist toward Baker Street. Holmes stopped, head inclined, lips barely moving. "It follows," he said. Not us, but the truth itself. Holmes did not move as the sound faded. He stood in the fog-bound street like a man listening to his own heartbeat. Then, without turning, he said quietly, "The echo's source is not fixed. It migrates with the listener." I scarcely understood him. "You mean it follows us physically?" "No," he replied. "Psychologically. When sound has no instrument, the mind becomes its chamber. That, Watson, is where the true haunting begins." We climbed into the cab. Holmes leaned forward, eyes half closed, as if tracing invisible lines through the mist. The driver flicked the reins, and the wheels began their low percussive rhythm. 3 turns. Pause. 3 again. The pattern had infected everything. "You hear it too?" I murmured. "Yes," Holmes said. "But now we must discover who winds the spring that keeps it beating." At Baker Street, the fire still glowed faintly. Holmes removed his coat, shook the damp from his sleeves, and crossed to the writing table where the morning's telegrams lay. He lifted one, read it, and handed it to me. From Inspector Gregson, Bow Street. Venn confessed to poisoning, claims the dead actor sent him messages through coat. Request your presence at daybreak. I looked up. He insists the messages continued after his arrest. Holmes nodded slowly, which means someone else continues the performance. He drew from his pocket the King of Hearts and laid it upon the table beside the phonograph cylinder. Tregarron orchestrated his own demise, but the stage remains set. Observe how every prop has found its way to us. The card, the coat, the voice. Someone ensures the scene repeats. But who gains from it now? That, my dear fellow, is the question which keeps me awake. He began pacing, fingertips pressed together. The floorboards echoed faintly beneath his steps. 3 beats. Pause. 3 again. Consider, Watson. The message, the final scene awaits. The Orpheum safe key, the link between theaters. Tregarron left his confession, yes, but he also left an inheritance, a mechanism designed to replay guilt until someone worthy understood its pattern. You speak as though the crime itself were unfinished. It is. Because guilt, in this instance, is transferable, the question is, to whom? He stopped abruptly and turned toward the window. You remember the fog that night on Shaftesbury Avenue? The street lamps barely visible. Of course. Then you may recall another sound beneath the wheels of our cab. An engine, faint and constant, like a pump drawing air. I frowned, recalling it dimly. A ventilator? Holmes nodded. Theaters employ them to circulate heat. But if connected through the old stage tunnels, that same system could carry more than air. It could transmit vibration. He strode to the cupboard, retrieved his violin case, and withdrew not the instrument, but a thin metal tube with a membrane stretched across one end. An experimental device of my own. When attached to a vent, it captures resonant frequency. If the echo that haunts us still travels the old theater ducts, this will sing its location. Without further explanation, he threw on his coat again. Come, Watson. The night has not yet reached its closing act. We hailed another cab, heading back toward the Strand. The driver looked alarmed when Holmes instructed him to stop between the two theatres, the Duke's and the Orpheum, where a narrow alley ran between their adjoining walls. The place smelled of soot and stagnant water. Holmes crouched beside an iron grate. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. I listened, faint, rhythmic, 3 soft thuds like the tapping of distant fingers. He placed his device upon the grate and adjusted the tube. The membrane vibrated almost imperceptibly, producing a thin hum that rose and fell with the knocking. "It is alive," he murmured. "Not mechanical. Someone is generating this manually from within, sir. Then we're not alone." "Precisely." He produced a small screwdriver, loosened the grate, and slid it aside. Cold air surged out. "Stay behind me," he said, descending into the passage below. We found ourselves within a narrow brick conduit that sloped downward. The sound grew clearer. 3 knocks, pause, 3 again, each accompanied by a faint rush of air. The passage widened into a low chamber lined with pipes. At its center stood a wooden stool, a lantern, and a small bellows attached to the tube. A figure bent over it, pumping slowly. Holmes's voice cut through the dimness. "That will suffice, madam." The woman turned, startled. Her face was pale beneath the lamplight, powdered like an actress ready for the stage. I recognized her from the playbill we had found earlier. Miss Celia Dawn, Tregarron's leading lady. Holmes stepped closer. "I see you maintain the rhythm faithfully. 3 beats for the dead, 3 for the living." She stared at him, hands trembling on the bellows. "He told me to keep it alive," she whispered. "He said as long as the sound continued, he would not fade." "Then he deceived you, Miss Dawn. The sound does not preserve life. It repeats guilt. You are playing the murderer's refrain." "No," her voice broke. "You don't understand." He feared silence. He feared that without applause, he would cease to exist. Holmes regarded her gravely. "And so you became his audience of one." She sank to her knees, clutching the bellows. "I only wanted to hear him again." "And you have," said Holmes softly. "But echoes do not answer. They only return what we give them." For a moment, there was no sound but her sobbing. Then, through the open vents above us, came another rhythm, 3 slow beats from somewhere deeper in the system. Holmes's head snapped up. "That is not her doing." He seized the lantern and advanced toward a second tunnel branching from the chamber. "Someone else is there, Watson." Another listener, or another hand upon the instrument. The knocking continued, deliberate now, moving farther away as if luring us onward. Holmes lifted the lantern higher. The light caught a fragment of cloth snagged upon a nail, dark wool, unmistakably from a coat. He turned to me, eyes bright with sudden urgency. "Watson, this case has not finished performing. It is beginning again." From the darkness ahead came one final sound, a single knock, sharp as a heartbeat stopping. The sharp knock still reverberated through the narrow tunnel, its echo returning as a low, metallic shiver. Holmes was already moving, lantern held forward, his coat brushing against the damp walls as he followed the sound. I hurried behind, the uneven rhythm of our steps mingling with the fading pulse of that unseen signal. "Careful, Holmes," I whispered. "The ground slopes downward." "Yes. Toward the river, if my bearings are correct," he answered. "And toward whoever would keep this echo alive long after its author has died." The passage grew narrower until we were forced to stoop. Ahead, the light caught the outline of another door, iron-bound, streaked with rust. The faint knocking came again from beyond it, slower now, as though whoever struck had wearied. Holmes set the lantern upon a ledge and examined the hinges. "Old service access," he murmured. "From the days before either theater rebuilt. This may connect directly beneath the embankment." He took a thin blade from his pocket, worked it between the hasp and the staple, and within moments the lock yielded. The door opened inward with a moan that seemed almost human. Beyond lay a small brick chamber, barely 10 feet square. A single oil lamp burned upon a crate. Beside it stood a man, stooped, grey-haired, his face hidden behind dark spectacles despite the gloom. In one hand he held a wooden mallet. The wall before him bore 6 shallow dents arranged in pairs, 3 high, 3 low. Holmes's voice was low, steady. "You may put down the instrument, sir. The performance is concluded." The man turned slowly. His features were thin, almost scholar-like, but the eyes behind the glasses glittered with fanatic purpose. "You are late, Mr. Holmes. The play has already entered its final act." Holmes regarded him closely. "Your voice, sir, betrays education. You are not a workman, yet you use a laborer's tool. That is no affectation, it is penance. You are part of the design, perhaps its architect." The stranger inclined his head. "I designed the tube that carried Tregarron's voice. I gave him his echo, his immortality. I did not know it would outlive us all." "Your name?" "Finlay Kerr, acoustic engineer, consultant to both theatres before the merger of their ventilation systems." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Then it was you who created the network that transmits these sounds between walls. The ghost that never dies because the building itself breathes." Kerr smiled faintly. He wanted to be remembered through sound, not sight. He said applause fades too soon. I warned him it might carry further than he wished. When he died, I tried to silence it, but the resonance remained. Each structure retains a portion of its original tone. It began to call back. "Buildings do not call, Mr. Kerr. Men do, perhaps," the old man murmured. "Or perhaps memory requires a voice, and I am merely the instrument." Holmes advanced a step. "You have continued this knocking for how long?" "Since the night of his death. Every evening at 2, the hour the curtain fell. It keeps the system from collapsing. Without it, the tunnels would choke with stagnant air. Or so I tell myself." "And in truth?" Holmes asked. Kerr's shoulders sagged. "In truth, I cannot stop. I hear it even when I sleep. 3 beats, pause, 3 again. If I cease, the silence grows until I must answer." Holmes turned to me. "You see, Watson, the echo has become its own listener." The man who built the instrument became enslaved by its reply. He faced Kerr once more. "You believe Tregarron speaks to you still?" "I know it." Last night his voice changed pitch. He asked for completion. "The final scene," he said. "That was why I summoned you." "Summoned me?" Kerr pointed to the table. Upon it lay a telegraph pad. The message at the top read, "Come at once." The coat moves again. It bore Castor's signature, or so it appeared. Holmes bent close, examining the handwriting. Clever. The strokes are heavier, the loops cramped, written by one imitating another. "You, Mr. Kerr, sent this telegram to lure us here." "Why?" Kerr's hands trembled. "Because the echo grows louder each night. I thought, if you could find its heart, you might still it." Holmes's expression softened, though his eyes remained keen. "And have you truly not discerned its heart?" "No." "Then permit me to demonstrate." He lifted the lantern higher, its light glancing off the wall's dented surface. 6 indentations, arranged as 2 measures of rhythm. Each blow you struck resonated through metal pipes extending in both directions. The sound reached the Duke's theatre and the Orpheum alike. "Now watch." He raised his walking stick and tapped once in the center between the dents. The sound rang clear, pure, sustained, and from somewhere above, the same tone answered, perfectly matched. "There," said Holmes. "A concealed air duct connects vertically, not horizontally. The resonance chamber lies directly beneath the stage. You have been striking not at walls, but at a diaphragm that carries the vibration upward. Kerr stared, transfixed. Then, if the sound reaches the stage, it continues the illusion. Every night the audience hears a ghost they mistake for imagination. Kerr covered his face. I have been his accomplice still. Holmes laid a hand upon his shoulder. No, you have been his victim. Tregarron's vanity required both believer and mourner. You were both. For a moment all was silent save the faint hiss of the lamp. Then from the duct above came a new sound, softer than before, but deliberate. A single breath expelled into the tunnel, as though someone whispered through the very air. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. Did you hear? Yes, said Holmes. The system remains charged. The pressure differential draws the outside air across its mouth, creating what you take for voice. In other words, Watson, the dead speak by physics, not miracle. He adjusted the lamp's flame. Mr. Kerr, we shall end this tonight. Once the diaphragm is removed, the echo will cease forever. Kerr nodded weakly. Then do it quickly. I no longer trust myself to remain silent. Holmes took his tools and began loosening the bolts along the wall plate. As the final screw turned, the chamber released a sigh, and with it a gust of cold air that extinguished the lamp. In the sudden darkness, the knocking began again, not above, but all around us, circling the walls in steady rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 again. Holmes's voice came through the blackness, calm but urgent. Watson, light, quickly. The echo has found another path. I struck a match with trembling fingers. The flare revealed Holmes crouched near the wall plate, his features set in fierce concentration, eyes reflecting the wavering light like twin sparks. Kerr stood frozen, the mallet clutched to his chest, staring as the very bricks seemed to pulse with the rhythm that surrounded us. Hold the flame steady, Holmes ordered. It's not the air that moves, it's the resonance passing from chamber to chamber. The system is alive because someone has reopened the vents. Someone? I echoed. He nodded. Look here. The pressure valve has been reset from outside. The question, Watson, is by whom? Even as he spoke, the knocking grew louder, not rhythmic now, but frantic, like fists demanding entry from behind the walls. Kerr covered his ears with a low moan. He's angry. He knows we mean to silence him. Control yourself, sir, said Holmes sharply. You hear the vibration through bone conduction. It's physics, not phantasm. Watson, the second lamp. Quickly. I lit the spare lantern. Its glow revealed a narrow fissure in the brickwork behind Kerr's stool. Holmes inserted his blade, widened the gap, and exposed a vertical shaft lined with metal tubing. At its base glimmered a fragment of something pale. Fetch it out, Watson. I reached into the opening and drew forth a small scrap of paper stiff with damp. Holmes unfolded it carefully. Upon it were scrawled the words, "Tonight the audience returns." Beneath, the same 3 small crosses we had seen on the King of Hearts, Holmes's eyes gleamed. We are not merely pursued by memory, my dear fellow. Someone living intends to replay the scene itself. Kerr shook his head violently. No, no one else knows this place. I never spoke of it. Then you were overheard, said Holmes. The walls you built carry not only sound outward, but inward. You have been confessing nightly to ears unseen. He turned briskly toward me. We must reach the stage before the hour of 2. Whoever orchestrates this resurrection will strike there. The message declares it. Kerr seized his sleeve. You can't go through the upper vents. They're sealed from the theatre side. Holmes smiled faintly. Then we shall ascend by the route less theatrical. He gestured to the shaft. Iron rungs were set into its side, slick with moisture. Without hesitation he began to climb, the lantern dangling from his belt. I followed close behind, feeling the walls throb faintly with each breath of wind through the tubes. Kerr remained below, murmuring a half-prayer, half-mechanical count of the rhythm. When we emerged, it was into the substructure directly beneath the Duke's stage, the same space we had visited on our first night. The boards above us quivered faintly. Somewhere beyond, faint voices and movements suggested that the theatre was not as deserted as we had believed. Holmes raised a hand. Listen. Through the vents came a faint murmur, lines of Shakespeare distorted by distance. I caught fragments only, the weight of this sad time we must obey. And then applause, faint but real. Impossible, I whispered. There's no performance scheduled tonight. Then we attend a ghostly one, he replied grimly. The message was literal. The audience returned. We climbed the service ladder and emerged behind the stage curtains. Gaslights burned dimly, casting long, uncertain shadows, and upon the boards stood figures, dozens of them, motionless, half visible through the haze. At first I thought them living, but a step nearer revealed painted faces, mannequins dressed in theatre attire, arranged as if frozen mid-scene. In their midst stood the coat. It hung upon a frame shaped like a man's shoulders, its sleeves lifted slightly as if about to applaud. Holmes approached slowly. A stage set for the dead Tussaudatae play their final act, he murmured. I felt an unease like cold water along my spine. Who could have done this? Someone who knew Ven's confession would reach us. Someone who understood the power of repetition. He crouched beside the coat, examined the floor beneath it, and lifted a square of loose board. Beneath lay another phonograph, wound and ready. Stand back. He pressed the lever. The horn crackled, and Tregarron's voice filled the theatre once more. The king dies as he must, but another wears the crown. The mannequins trembled slightly as the sound vibrated through the boards. The coat swayed upon its frame. Then a second voice joined it. Fainter, higher, unmistakably female. He shall not die alone. Holmes's eyes flashed. Miss Dawn! He sprang toward the wings where a single gaslight burned. There, half concealed behind a curtain, stood Celia Dawn herself, her face pale, eyes shining with feverish intensity. The bellows apparatus rested at her feet, the tube running from it directly beneath the stage. Step away from that, Miss Dawn, Holmes commanded. You're too late, she said softly. He comes every night, and tonight he answers. You've been manipulated, Holmes said. The echo you serve is not Tregarron. It's Kerr's machine responding to vibration. You've been breathing life into a corpse of air. She shook her head. You don't hear as I do. He promised me applause again. Holmes moved closer, calm but firm. If you continue, you will collapse the chamber beneath us. The air pressure will force the ductwork to implode. She hesitated, hand upon the pump handle. Then let it break. Let the silence swallow us both. He lunged, seizing her wrist. For an instant the handle jammed and then snapped. A sudden hiss erupted beneath the stage, followed by a deep groan from the timbers. The mannequins toppled like soldiers struck by a silent volley. Holmes dragged her backward as the boards heaved. Watson, out! Quickly! We stumbled toward the stairwell, Miss Dawn half fainting between us. Behind, the coat collapsed, its frame twisting as air rushed through the torn vents. From somewhere below came the roar of ruptured pipes and a single, final knock, deeper than all the rest, shaking dust from the rafters. Holmes looked back only once. So ends the encore, he murmured. But even as he spoke, the echo answered, a single tap from far beneath, measured and patient, as though something refused to die. Holmes held Miss Dawn upright as the vibration rumbled beneath our feet. The air itself seemed to thicken, each breath drawing the taste of smoke and metal. A panel from the ceiling cracked loose, scattering dust across the boards. The mannequins lay toppled, their painted eyes staring upward as if applauding the ruin. "Quickly, Watson, this way," Holmes urged, dragging her toward the backstage door. The floor buckled once more beneath the strain of the collapsing vents. From somewhere below rose that low, dreadful groan, sound both mechanical and human, like a dying breath turned into music. We burst into the corridor just as a blast of hot air shot through the grates, flinging the door against the wall. The lamps along the passage flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. Holmes stopped, listening. The echo was still there, but changed. Not the rhythmic knock we had come to know, but a continuous undertone, rising and falling like the exhalation of some great unseen lung. "He's still there," Miss Dawn whispered. "He's calling me." Holmes's grip tightened on her arm. "What you hear is pressure displacement. The resonance chamber beneath the stage has been compromised. If we do not vent it, the explosion will reduce both theaters to rubble." "Then what must we do?" I asked. "We return to the man who built it," he said grimly. "Only Kerr knows how to silence his creation." He turned back toward the service stair, his movements precise, efficient, every nerve focused. Miss Dawn followed without resistance, her expression distant, as though half her mind still lingered among the echoes. When we reached the chamber below, Kerr was on his knees, his hands pressed against the floor as though listening through his palms. The mallet lay discarded beside him. He looked up at Holmes with hollow eyes. I felt it begin. The current reversed. The sound feeds upon itself now. Holmes knelt beside him. "You can end it. The diaphragm you built. How do we release its pressure?" Kerr shook his head weakly. "It is too late. The resonance has found balance. If I open the vents, the shock wave will—" "Destroy everything," Holmes finished. "Yes, including us. But if we delay, the oscillation will amplify and do the same. Choose your method of ruin, sir, but choose quickly." The old man hesitated only a moment longer, then crawled toward the valve at the base of the wall. "When I break this seal, the air will rush outward through every connected tube. The sound will stop, but the recoil may tear the plates apart." Holmes drew Miss Dawn back behind the crate. "Watson, when I give the word, strike the lamp. Fire consumes air. It will lessen the pressure gradient." "Understood," I said, my pulse thundering in my ears. Kerr braced himself and turned the valve. A shriek like escaping steam filled the room. The lamp's flame wavered violently, guttered, and I smashed it against the wall. For an instant, the chamber glowed with a fierce orange flare, and then came silence. Perfect, absolute silence. Holmes lowered his head, listening for the echo that had haunted us so long. Nothing. Only the slow drip of condensation from the ruptured pipes. Miss Dawn began to weep quietly. "It's gone. He's gone." Holmes looked at her, not unkindly. "No, madam. He was gone long before tonight. You have only ceased repeating him." Kerr slumped against the wall, chest heaving. "You've silenced it, but you don't understand. The sound needed escape. Now it will travel where it can." Holmes frowned. "Explain yourself." The old man pointed toward the vent. "Every echo finds new walls, Mr. Holmes. Even if we end it here, the vibration continues in the air. It may reach miles before it fades." Holmes considered this in silence, his expression unreadable. Then he rose and extended his hand. "You have done what conscience demanded. Let that suffice." Kerr took it with trembling fingers. "Will it ever stop?" "All sound ceases in time," said Holmes softly. "The difficulty lies in outliving its memory." He turned toward me. "Watson, see Miss Dawn safely to the cab. Then return for Kerr. The authorities will want his statement before dawn." I nodded. As I helped her up the steps, I looked back to see Holmes standing alone by the open vent, listening with head slightly inclined. For a moment I thought the silence pressed upon him like a tangible weight, demanding interpretation. Outside, the fog had thinned to a damp silver veil. The city still slept, unaware that beneath its theatres a storm of air and memory had just died. Miss Dawn leaned wearily against the wall. "He wanted the world to remember him," she murmured. "And now, no one will." "You remember him," I said. She smiled faintly through her tears. "Perhaps that's enough." Holmes emerged a moment later, his coat powdered with dust, his face composed once more. "The pressure is equalized. The danger has passed. Kerr is resting below. He will face justice for his part, but I suspect the greater punishment will be silence itself." We rode home in near quiet. Only once did Holmes speak, his tone reflective. "Strange, Watson, that a man should fear oblivion more than guilt. Tregarron sought immortality through repetition, but all he created was an echo too obedient to die." "And yet, Holmes," I said, "even now I could swear I still hear it faintly, the same rhythm somewhere in the distance." He gave a weary half-smile. "That, my dear friend, is only the memory of the sound. When the mind has been tuned to an obsession, even silence plays its refrain." At Baker Street we parted for the night. Holmes went directly to the hearth, poured himself a measure of whiskey, and stood gazing into the embers. As I turned to leave, he spoke once more, very softly, as if to the fire itself. "Every echo ends, Watson, but not before it teaches us the cost of listening too long." The coals shifted then with a tiny crack. 3 quick pops, a pause, and 3 again. Holmes's eyes lifted slowly toward the sound. Holmes's eyes followed the faint crackle from the hearth with unnerving stillness. The coals settled once more, and yet the sound returned. 3 crisp pops, then silence, then the same pattern again. I felt the hair stir at the back of my neck. "Holmes," I said quietly, "surely that is only coincidence." He did not answer. His gaze remained fixed upon the embers, every muscle tense as though he listened for more than hearing could provide. When at last he spoke, it was in a tone I had never heard from him, half fascination, half fatigue. "Coincidence, Watson, is merely the name we give to patterns whose authors we have yet to identify." He bent, prodded the coal gently with the poker, and listened once more. "Observe. The rhythm is too regular for chance. It mimics the very cadence of the theatre's code." "But how could that be possible?" I demanded. "We left the apparatus destroyed. The ducts are sealed." "The ducts, yes," he said, "but not the air itself. The vibration may have impressed upon the surrounding material, a sympathetic echo retained within porous substance. A trivial phenomenon in acoustics, though rarely of such persistence." "You mean the wood remembers?" Holmes straightened. "In a sense, as a violin holds the ghost of every note ever played. But here," he paused, brow furrowed, "there is something else. The pattern has altered." He crouched again, ear nearly to the grate. "Listen, the spacing widens by a fraction. That is not mechanical decay. It is deliberate replication." I stared at him. "Replication by whom?" He smiled faintly. "By the only element that remains constant between theatre and hearth, me." "You?" "Yes. The rhythm answers to observation. Each time I focus upon it, the interval shifts, as if aligning with the beat of my own pulse. Fascinating, is it not? The echo has adapted to its listener. It has learned the rhythm of thought." "Holmes," I said, alarmed, "you are overtired. You have not slept since the night before last. This is the residue of strain, nothing more." He waved me off impatiently. "Perhaps. Yet I have long suspected that phenomena mistaken for haunting are but the persistence of energy seeking resonance. In that case, Watson, what is a mind but the finest resonator of all?" He turned toward his violin, resting upon the side table. "Let us test a theory." Before I could protest, he tuned the instrument and drew the bow across the strings. The note that issued forth was low, tremulous, and instantly, from the hearth, came a faint answering pop. Then another. The flame shivered in rhythm with the sound. Holmes's face lit with triumph. There. The frequency corresponds. The fire answers in kind. We are witnessing the transference of harmonic energy through air and matter. Proof that the echo is not extinguished, but reborn through sympathetic medium. You are suggesting that the theatre's echo lives now in this room? Lives is a poet's word, he said softly. But yes, it endures. I felt an unease beyond reason. Then stop playing, for heaven's sake. He obeyed, lowering the bow. The silence that followed seemed heavy, expectant. The ticking of the mantel clock sounded unnaturally loud. Then, 3 faint knocks, this time from the wall beside my chair. Holmes looked up sharply. Not the hearth now. The sound migrates. Observe the intelligence of its course. Each repetition moves toward open space, as though searching for origin. I stepped back from the wall, heart pounding. Surely, Holmes, this borders on the supernatural. He smiled wearily. Nothing borders on the supernatural, Watson. There is only nature we have yet to measure. He crossed to his writing desk, tore a blank sheet from his notebook, and scribbled rapidly. These intervals, these shifts, they suggest deliberate modulation. If we chart them... The sound interrupted him again. 3 knocks, louder, from the door leading to the corridor. We both froze. Holmes placed a finger to his lips, moved quietly to the door, and opened it an inch. No one. The hallway lay empty, yet the same rhythm echoed faintly down the stairwell. He shut the door and turned to me, eyes gleaming. Do you grasp it now, Watson? The echo has detached from material constraint. It has become itinerant, a pattern of vibration searching for new resonance. The case continues, not in fact, but in form. Then what do you propose? We follow it. Before I could argue, he seized his coat and hat. The sound descends. That suggests density of air increasing with depth. Perhaps the basement pipes. The old flues from the city heating mains might provide perfect transmission. I followed reluctantly, still hearing the faint rhythmic tapping beneath the stair. We descended into the narrow cellar, where the gaslight hissed softly. The sound was clearer now, metallic, purposeful. Holmes crouched beside an iron vent at the wall's base and placed his ear against it. Just as I thought. The theater ducts connect indirectly through the gasworks conduits. The entire city becomes a single vast instrument. He rose, brushing dust from his knees. Watson, we are not haunted by the dead, but by our own ingenuity. A network designed for warmth has become a web for memory. And can it be stopped? Perhaps. But consider, what if it should not be? The city breathes, Watson. It remembers. Tregarron's final scene will fade, yes, but others will rise. Every whisper of human artifice leaves its mark upon the air. You speak as though content to let it go on. Holmes smiled faintly. I have no quarrel with echoes, only with those who mistake them for truth. He turned toward the stairs, but paused as a new sound emerged. Fainter, higher, almost melodic. It was the rhythm again, yet drawn out like a phrase upon the violin. Holmes looked back, head inclined. Remarkable. The pattern has evolved. Evolved, I repeated. Yes, Watson. It has learned to sing. The sound rose, filling the cellar with a resonance that trembled through the pipes and floorboards, neither music nor noise, but something between, alive, unending. Holmes's expression was one of awe rather than fear. Listen well, my friend, he said softly. We are hearing the city's first memory. And then, as if to answer him, the light flickered once, and the final note hung suspended in the air, pure and solitary, refusing to fade. The solitary note lingered until the walls themselves seemed to vibrate with it, a ghost of tone suspended between breath and silence. Holmes stood motionless, head tilted, his expression a strange compound of reverence and suspicion. I confess my own nerves quivered beneath the sound. It was neither loud nor threatening, yet it carried an intimacy that felt indecent, as though something unseen were whispering directly into the bones. Then, softly, Holmes spoke. "Do you hear it diminish, Watson? Not fading, receding. It draws away from us, not into quiet, but into distance. You mean it travels?" "Yes. Through the mains, through the city's hollow arteries. Every vent, every pipe, every chimney flue becomes its organ stop. The city itself is its orchestra." I struggled to steady my voice. "And what are we to do? Surely such a vibration cannot continue indefinitely." He gave a dry laugh. "Nothing is indefinite, my dear fellow. Not even fear. But this is a phenomenon worth understanding before it dies." He raised the lantern toward the vent. The air shimmered faintly, though there was no heat. "Notice the quiver in the flame, Watson. There is rhythm still, but its pulse grows regular, like the measured breathing of a sleeper." "You make it sound alive," I said. Holmes turned to me sharply. "Alive? Perhaps not conscious, but reactive. That is close enough to life for philosophy." He straightened, brushing soot from his sleeve. "This, I think, is Tregarron's final trick. Not supernatural revenge, but a man's vanity echoing through the inventions of others. He found a way to make remembrance physical, to haunt the very air. Then we have ended his work at last?" "Ended? No, Watson. We have merely understood it. The difference is everything." The sound trembled once more, softer now, as though it withdrew into some deeper layer of the city. Holmes's face, illuminated by the lantern, looked older than I had ever seen it. "You see," he murmured, "the true danger lies not in death, but in the refusal to conclude. Even silence demands closure. That was his failure, and perhaps mine as well." He turned toward the stairs, the faint hum following us like a shadow. As we climbed, it diminished further until by the time we reached the sitting room, only the ticking of the clock remained. Yet that rhythm, too, had changed. 3 ticks, a pause, 3 again. I looked to him in alarm, but Holmes only smiled faintly. "Do not mistake recurrence for return, Watson. The pattern has become part of perception. We are attuned to it now, and shall hear it in everything until memory relinquishes its hold." He seated himself by the fire, poured another measure of whiskey, and gestured for me to sit. "You see before you a paradox, my friend. A case solved not by ending, but by comprehension. The coat that moved without a man, the echo that lived without a voice. All instruments of the same human conceit, that remembrance can outwit mortality. And yet I ventured, some part of it succeeded. You yourself will remember this sound for the rest of your life." He chuckled softly. "Precisely. In that, Tregarron achieved immortality of the only honest kind. Through witness, we are his echo now." The coals settled, again releasing a small cascade of sparks. 3 brief pops. Holmes raised an eyebrow. "You see, the city performs its encore." We sat for a long time without speaking. Outside, the wind began to stir along Baker Street, weaving faint tones through the chimney flues. To my ear, the current of air seemed to adopt the same low rhythm. 3 sighs, a pause, then 3 again. Holmes leaned back, eyes half closed, the ghost of a smile upon his lips. "You recall, Watson, that night in the theater when Venn confessed? He believed himself haunted by guilt, but in truth he was haunted by repetition. There is little difference between the two. A man condemned to hear his crime echoed endlessly is already his own prison." "And what of Miss Dawn?" He sighed. Her sentence will be silence. The absence of the echo will torment her more than its presence ever did. Such is the mind's perverse desire for continuity. For several minutes we listened only to the wind. Then Holmes spoke again, more gently. Every case, Watson, is an argument against the finality of death. We pursue truth not to prevent it, but to preserve meaning beyond it. That is our echo. I looked toward the window. The fog had lifted. Pale light from the gas lamps drew a trembling reflection across the glass. Beneath it, the city breathed, steady, ceaseless, alive with the memory of voices. Holmes rose, crossed to the window, and stood with one hand upon the curtain cord. The true marvel is not that the echo remains, but that we can choose to stop listening. He drew the curtain closed. The room dimmed. So, Watson, if ever you should hear this rhythm again, 3 beats, pause, 3. Do not fear it. It is only the residue of understanding. The air remembers, as do we. Nothing more. I nodded, though the sound already seemed to hover faintly at the edge of hearing, a pulse beneath the silence. Holmes extinguished the lamp, and the last light died upon the mantel clock. For a breathless moment, all was still. Then, from the darkness, came a single sound, soft, deliberate, unmistakable. One slow knock from within the wall behind the hearth. Holmes's voice was calm, almost tender. There now, Watson. Even silence takes a bow. Holmes's words lingered in the dark like a benediction, the faint echo of them folding into the single knock that had sounded from behind the hearth. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The stillness was so profound that even the crackle of the dying fire seemed ashamed to intrude. Then Holmes spoke again, his tone one of quiet reason rather than alarm. You notice, Watson, that it did not repeat. One sound, deliberate, isolated. The rhythm has resolved. Resolved? I whispered. It sounded more like a summons. Exactly. A call must be answered, and once answered, it does not return. He reached for the poker and tapped once against the grate. The metal rang cleanly. No echo came. I felt a strange disappointment then, mingled with relief. So that is the end of it. Holmes gave a small nod. The end, yes. But endings, like echoes, require a listener. We have performed that service. He replaced the poker, sat down again, and regarded the fading embers. You see, my dear fellow, every mystery concludes twice, once in the mind, once in the heart. Intellect resolves what emotion must learn to release. It is the difference between silence and peace. And which have we achieved? He smiled faintly. I suspect both will take turns. The clock struck 3. The sound was steady, unbroken. Whatever rhythmic intrusion had haunted us before was gone, yet its absence left the room feeling oddly hollow, as though we had stepped outside a melody mid-bar. Holmes poured the last of the whiskey into his glass and spoke after a moment's reflection. You know, Watson, there are cases that end with an arrest, others with a revelation, but tonight's has given us neither, only understanding. That, I think, is the rarest verdict of all. And what of Kerr and Miss Dawn? They will live out their sentences in their own minds. The law may pardon or punish as it pleases. It cannot compete with memory. Theirs will echo longer than any judgment. He rose, crossed to the desk, and opened his notebook. I watched him write a few brief lines, the scratch of the pen sounding disproportionately loud. I will title it, he said, The Coat Hung Where No Man Stood. You're recording it already? While it still breathes, Watson. Memory is a fickle witness. Best to capture it before sentiment distorts the evidence. I smiled. And what lesson will you draw from it? He paused, pen hovering above the page. That human vanity is the most persistent resonance of all. Men build machines to outlive them, and when those machines obey, they call it haunting. But in truth, It is only obedience, an echo of pride too stubborn to fade. His words struck me with quiet force. You speak as if we are all haunted. We are, he said simply. Not by ghosts, but by the wish to matter. He closed the notebook and set it aside. The faint scent of extinguished coal lingered in the air. I felt the fatigue of long wakefulness descend upon me, yet neither of us seemed ready for sleep. Holmes, I said after a time, you are not troubled by what we've heard tonight, by what it suggests. He considered this. Troubled, no. Intrigued, perhaps. If thought can leave an imprint upon air and stone, then every crime, every kindness may linger beyond its hour. What greater incentive for virtue could there be than to imagine our deeds whispering long after we are gone? Then Tregarrin achieved a kind of immortality after all. Only the kind reserved for cautionary tales, Holmes replied. His voice remains, yes, but stripped of intention. What speaks now is the hollow shell of ambition, a warning, not a triumph. The fire gave its final sigh and sank into ash. The darkness that followed felt clean, like the closing of a well-read book. Holmes leaned back, his features softened by fatigue. I think, Watson, that London will sleep easier tonight, even if it dreams in rhythm. I laughed quietly, though my heart felt strangely tight. And you? Will you sleep? He shook his head. I rarely do after endings. They are too loud, even in silence. He rose and moved to the window, parting the curtain just enough to look out upon the gaslit street. A milk cart rattled past, its wheels striking the cobbles in an uneven cadence. Holmes smiled faintly. There it is again. The rhythm persists. The city keeps time even when the music ceases. I joined him. The dawn was beginning to bleed faintly into the fog, washing the rooftops in pallid silver. The sound of the cart faded, replaced by the softer murmur of waking streets. Holmes, I said, do you ever tire of listening? He considered, then turned from the window. Never. The world speaks endlessly, Watson, and most men hear only themselves. To listen beyond oneself, that is the only honest work I know. He extinguished the lamp and gestured toward the door. Go to bed, my dear friend. Let the air keep its memories a while longer. Tomorrow, perhaps, it will forget. I obeyed, though as I reached the threshold, another sound came, a faint settling within the chimney, softer than breath. 3 tiny clicks, almost imperceptible. Holmes heard it too. He did not turn, only murmured with the ghost of amusement, There, you see. The city takes its curtain call. The fireless grate gave one last pop, sharp, solitary, final.